Hello, everyone. Hi, and welcome to this risk management webinar about making your church facility safe for winter, cold weather, winterizing your facility. We're glad you've joined us today. My name is David Fournier. I'm the Marketing and Communication Manager for Adventist Risk Management. I want to share just a few points about how the webinar works before I introduce our speaker. Today's presentation is being recorded so that you can watch it later or share it with someone else. And we want this to be an interactive experience. So I encourage your questions, but we want the presentation to stay on time. So please enter your questions in the question and answer box over there on the GoToMeeting little window there. And I'll be monitoring those questions, and I will either answer it if it's something I should answer or pass it along to our speaker at a logical interval. Normally, our webinars last about 30 minutes, and today should be no exception. We should be right in there with time for questions at the end as well. So let me introduce our speaker today. John Dugan is our Senior Risk Control Specialist. John is based in California, but we're happy to have him here in Silver Spring today. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to be here.
Well, let's begin. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so it seems like the best place to start is sort of why do we want to do this in the first place? I know we certainly had some comments from folks in the South who didn't think that this might apply to them. Why do we need to winterize our facilities?
Well, Dave, the why of winterizing is pretty simple. Obviously, we want to prevent future property damage that can occur. You get frozen pipes, the pipes split, water ends up leaking all over a building. And if nobody's in there for a while when this happens, it can result in significant property damage. And again, in some parts of it, it could be rendered unusable after such a thing happens. And some of the processes of winterizing can also help us to reduce our utility costs. Make our facilities more energy efficient, and our utility bills are going to go down. They'll be warmer inside. We can also use that winterizing process to make it safer for our employees around our facilities by reducing slip and fall accidents, which are some of the most common accidents you can find anywhere in the world. And it doesn't matter, it's not just with the Adventist Church, it's with everybody. Preventing those slip and fall accidents, which obviously increase during the winter months with ice, snow, sleet, and those kind of inclement conditions.
Certainly, even when it's wet, leaving the office here sometimes as I get back to my car, it can get a little dicey.
It can. Now, if we look at our claims for just the NAD water damage losses alone, I think we talk about numbers and then what can happen. You look at that, you see a frequency for 115 claims and a severity of over 15. Oops, there should have been a decimal point in there, but over $15 million. And if you look at the worldwide losses, they're significantly higher. So it's one of those things we really, when we have those kind of losses within the church, those definitely affect how we can accomplish our mission in our facilities. Those kind of numbers just wreak havoc with what we can do.
So that's over 5 years, and we're looking at almost $16 million. That's not insignificant.
No, it's a large amount of money.
Wow.
And if you look at the worldwide, like I said, the worldwide results, they're just even incredibly higher.
Right. Wow. Well, so now we know we need to take this seriously. What if we do live in the South, though?
Yeah, we hear that a lot. I live in this warm southern climate, and we don't get that kind of weather. But the records and the history shows that indeed we do. Our statistics show that we do. Those headlines that I've posted on our on your screens, frosty Florida sets record low temperatures. That was in USA Today in 2010. South Texas ice storm, February 3rd and 4th, 2011. Southern Californians bundle amid cold advisories. What happens is we get into those kind of situations where we don't think it can happen to us, and then we kind of become complacent and we don't turn our heat up high enough, or we don't do what needs to be done to keep freezes from affecting us as dramatically as they can. So it's very important that we look at what, if it's happened somewhere before, it's going to happen again. It may not have happened last year, but it may have happened there 2 years ago. And we need to be aware of that. We need to know what's happened in our area and be prepared for the cold.
I guess it's that one time every year or two or five that's really going to get you. And when it gets
Yes.
you, that's really going to hurt.
Yep, that's when we get complacent. We've been comfortable for a long time, and then boom.
Yeah. So it's better to plan for that one event than let it hit you.
Exactly. And there's all kinds of water damage losses. As when we looked at our claims and you look at the statistics, there's all kinds of events that in the wintertime can result in losses. Significantly, a large number of them are from the frozen pipes. We can also end up with having windstorms that come through, and they blow up and damage some of the roofing and materials. And then when the roofing materials are damaged, then we end up with the water leaks, and we get the internal damage, and we get mold buildup. So you have all kinds of things. Or we can get enough snow and ice load on top of our facilities that we end up with having a collapse of the entire structure, the roofing structure. And that, of course, creates significant damage to the interior and all of the equipment and stuff we have inside. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at. What kind of losses might we have, and then plan accordingly for those losses. When we talk about planning early, I like to go into it and we talk about, hey, it's fall, we should be getting ready for the cold weather that's approaching. But it really begins with something else that I want to emphasize here, because when I do my inspections, there's a lot of times I see conditions that they should have been fixed a long time ago. Conditions that are normally fixed with a good year-round preventive maintenance program that takes a look at the condition of roofs and takes a look at the condition of siding and our windows and things, and stuff we'll see later on. But the deficiencies obviously reflect some kind of a need for change. There's a couple of images we've got on our screen here that, the gutter itself, gutters are going to collect leaves and debris, and we need to clean them periodically. But when things start growing in our gutters, I think, it should be easily recognizable that that's not where we want bushes and trees. And we obviously do not want them growing on our roofs either.
So you're saying probably the rainwater's not going to flow through there very effectively?
It probably is not going to. And the roots will just love it.
Lesson learned there.
But the point does come back to is yes, you need a good preventive maintenance program. But yes, you have a lot of other things in the prevention of winter freezes and water damage that does need to be looked at in the fall. And normally in the fall, you will have gutters full of leaves because they're coming off the trees in bushels. And so it's a regular thing to have to clean those gutters out. And if you don't clean the gutters out, the water can back up in them, go underneath the roofing a little bit, and start causing interior damage. So it's things that you need to start early with. And you'll see some other things as we go through the presentation that are effective in making sure you're prepared in advance. We need to make sure that we plan ahead for all kinds of things. Power outages. Do we have generators possibly that we may need? If we lose our power, we're going to lose our heat. We lose our heat and it's really cold out, what's going to happen? Our pipes are going to freeze. And all kinds of other damage can occur. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for that. And it may require using generators to sometimes keep some of our buildings a little bit warmer. And we need to think ahead also towards snow and ice removal. Now, a lot of facilities will actually contract that work out. They'll hire somebody well in advance and know that, particularly on Sabbath morning, that driveway and those streets or the sidewalks are going to be clean before the church members get there. Now, we may also use our own folks sometimes to do some of the cleanup and some of the snow and ice removal. So we'll have we need to make sure we have shovels on hand, and we need to make sure that we have ice melting products available too and readily available. What we don't want to see is a lot of our people, like we talked about snow loads and wanting to make sure we don't end up with roof damage due to the snow loads. That should be contracted out. Getting our own people up on slippery roofs to remove snow and ice is just looking for a major accident to happen. There are people that do that for a living. I'd say we leave it to them.
Yeah, that seems like it makes sense to me. Let them bear the liability and do it correctly.
And we talk about roof protection. It's very crucial that we actually maintain our roofs real well. It's a lot of times I see them they're some pretty bad condition.
Can I ask you a question about the
Sure.
well-maintained? I hear that term used a lot in our webinars and stuff. I wonder if I can ask you to just get a little bit illustrative or practical
Okay.
in that. What does it mean to maintain a roof?
Well, and there's a variety of different types of roofs. There's shingled roofs. There are tiled roofs. Sometimes there's flat or just a mild slope roof that has a coating on them. And it's all of those have a particular lifespan. It may be a 5-year span, a 10-year lifespan, a 15-year lifespan. And we need to look at them regularly to make sure that the roof is actually holding up. A coated roof, that coating needs to be recoated sometimes every year. Part of that maintenance and preventive maintenance plan would be to come in and make sure that we add another coating. And when there's traffic on a roof to work on air conditioning, to work on other things that are on the roof, it'll wear those surfaces down and create damage. So we're looking to make sure that those travel spots are not worn through, and putting on whatever extra coatings we need to do. We're looking to make sure that the wind has not lifted and started removing some of our shingles. If a couple of shingles go, the more shingles are going to go. What are the conditions of them? Sun over time, basically the UV just really does a job on shingles, and they start to lose their coating and things that will help prevent leaks. And so we need to make sure that we're actually getting in there and making sure that that's all in good condition. Could I tell you how often? Sometimes it depends on the roof. But a good preventive maintenance program takes a look at the type of roof they have, takes a look at what manufacturer recommends perhaps on maintenance of that roof, and then follows those and looks for things, especially after big windstorms have hit. Would that windstorm do to our roof, and do we need to do anything else to make sure it's ready? It's in good shape and ready for the next storm.
I'm guessing, again, the point about using professionals for the roof work still holding true here.
Exactly. And some roofs, they're just so far up and so tapered that there's no way that we could even come close to meeting fall protection standards to do the kind of work that would be needed on them. I see professionals sometimes even skip that part, so we know our folks are not going to be really in line with what needs to be done to do it safely. I want to mention underlayments too. It's a very good way to help prevent roofing leaks, is to have a good underlayment that's in the valleys. It's where the penetrations come through for vent pipes and chimneys. It's along the roof edges, and it provides a good place for a good seal around all those, and will help prevent leaks in the future. Heating maintenance falls right down the same thing. Annually, we need to bring out somebody and have them take a look at our heating systems and make sure that they are in good condition. They're going to check, make sure our fan's running smoothly. If anything needs to be lubricated, it's lubricated. They usually will look for any potential leaks or cracks in the heating chambers, so that we're not going to end up getting carbon monoxide or things in the building. So they're looking at all of these kind of things and making sure that the system's going to work properly. If our heating system doesn't work properly, we run that risk of again having the frozen pipes and then starting right over with all the damage. And while we're mentioning it, it's also important to make sure that we check our chimneys and flues and make sure that those two are clean and properly operating.
I remember experiencing a chimney fire when I was a kid. It was a terrifying and yet exciting afternoon. Got all the bells and whistles from the fire department that day.
Yeah, and if you know, we have to make sure that those everything's in good condition because yeah, in a condition where you have a fire, if there's any cracks in that wall of that chimney, it's going to be inside the building, and then you can lose the building too. Temporary heating. Um, Sometimes we'll see it out there. It's if it's hard in an older building to keep it warm. Sometimes folks will pick up some temporary heating to heat a particular area, a particular room. Um, the only caution that we need to remember is that they can be extremely hazardous in the fact that and it depends on the type of heating because there's various types of heaters. Some are just a warm oil based. They warm up a room and they haven't got the exposed um, little electrode things that get that put out an extreme amount of heat. Which, if you put that up close to something, it'll like combustibles, you can end up with a fire as well. But whatever we use, we need to just make sure that we're supervising it amply, making sure that we do have proper clearances for it. It usually says on the heater how far it should be from a particular object or combustibles. And we need to make sure that it's got tip over protection. I don't see those as much anymore, but every once in a while I run across one, and with if it hasn't got the tip over protection and it gets knocked over, it'll lay on the floor and it'll just continue to heat. Where the normal ones with the new ones with tip over protection, if you knock it over, it shuts off. So we strongly encourage is making sure that we have the ones with that extra added protection.
I like these pictures, John.
You know, as you look at trying to keep a place warm, it doesn't do much good if you've got just all these extra features added in that allow cold through. We do see a lot of cracked and broken windows. We see a lot where the window glazing that holds the glass in on a lot of the old-fashioned windows is starting to fall away, and so you have the gaps between the glass there where cold can come rushing through. And interestingly enough, as you can see with the door, the picture with the door and the arrows, um, it's got panic hardware on the door, which is great for an exit, although they did sort of block that exit a little bit on the right, so that stuff needed to be moved. But what I found fascinating was the gap between the door and the wall there, the door frame, because what you see is actually light coming through that door, and you see light reflected onto the floor. Not only is that going to let a lot of cold air in and overwork your heater and run your electric bill up, but it's also going to, I mean, I could see where somebody could easily run a wire between that door and that wall and activate that panic hardware and go ahead and come on in the building. That may have been an alarmed bar, which would help them a little bit, but just the same, we've got a major problem with that door fit, and those are the kind of places that we need to make sure that we seal.
Yeah, for sure. And I have no idea what's going on with the tape on the window there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. They were, I think, trying to keep it possibly from breaking or cracking anymore. It's hopefully it wasn't so they could reach in and do anything without getting cut.
Hope not.
There's other things we can do to try and prevent the winter freezes. Obviously, and one of them's easy. It's easy to add additional insulation in attics. We want to make sure we don't put it around something that's combustible as we're adding the insulation, but it can be blown in, it can be rolled in. Walls are a little harder. It's not impossible. Sometimes you can remove siding and add additional. Depends on the type of construction, but sometimes that can also be blown into through holes and things to increase the insulation factor of walls. And I'm sure there's other ways that are engineering wise that are used for that. Insulating our plumbing can help. There's times where we may want to add a layer of insulation and cover it and tape it so it just kind of stays. It's not catching the full brunt of the cold. I've just got to make sure that when we use an insulating property around a pipe that we don't, when we tape it, we don't compress it, because as soon as we've compressed that insulation, then we're losing a lot of the R factor or resistance factor from the cold when we do it. So there's a right way to do things and a wrong way. And obviously, there's people out there that can help us make sure that we do it the right way. Our pipes, sometimes we have a spigot that sticks through the building to the outside. If there's a valve on the inside that we can actually shut off and close off the water to that outside, and some places have them. I've been in some, and I've heard other people who say they have them. Then shut the water off to the outside when it's really, really cold, and that'll help prevent it from freezing on into the building. Again, we can insulate our pipes possibly in some cases. Even just wrapping some newspaper and some burlap and then plastic around an exterior one. But there's enough rolled insulation you can do it that way. Sealing around the gaps where pipes come through. A lot of times I see large openings where pipes extend through buildings. That's letting a lot of cold air in there, and it's letting a lot of cold air around that pipe, which is just going to freeze on back. It's also recommended that we disconnect our hoses. Water in the hose can freeze and then just kind of expand and go back up into the pipe. So we want to make sure we disconnect those hoses. When we talk about insulating pipes, there is heat tape made, and there are a number of pros and cons related to heat tape. And one of the big cons, obviously, is fires. If you look at the statistics, and I don't have the statistics here, but every year there are a large number of fires that are caused by heat tape. There's ways around that. I know I've had facilities that have had heat tape in them before, and heat tape is a very good product. It'll just kind of warm those pipes up and keep that freeze from occurring. But you have to make sure that you're buying a good certified and approved heat tape. Now, there's various standards. Underwriters Laboratory is one, Factory Mutual, Research Corporation's another. There's the Canadian Standards Association. They have theirs. So you have at least three major, and there may be more organizations who certify and approve heat tapes. So make sure that if you're going to use it, that you buy one of those that's certified and approved. And then make sure it's installed per the manufacturer. Everything has its place, and doing it right is one of the most important things that we can do. The other thing we need to do is inspect them yearly. That heat tape goes through a lot. It gets cold, extremely cold. It gets hot. It gets cold. It gets hot. So it's going in and out of this. It goes through a lot of different weather changes, because usually the heat tape's being used externally somewhere or in some very cold location. And eventually the insulation can crack on it, or other parts of it can become defective. And we need to make sure that if we find a defective one, that we get rid of it, throw it away. The other thing that is recommended is that apparently there's so much concern with how long these heat tapes last under those kind of conditions. They're actually recommending that these heat tapes be replaced every 3 years.
That's a pretty short life.
It is. When most things we like to think when we buy them, we're going to have them for a long time. But the people that produce these actually believe that, or the fire departments believe they need to be replaced more often.
We have a question just came in, and it has to do with the different types of pipes. And are there more frequently burst pipes with metal pipes, or PVC pipes, or what are the differences that we're looking at there?
I am not actually sure which are blowing the most. When it gets extremely cold, I think the old galvanized pipe probably lasted a whole lot better, and we used to wrap those. Lasted a whole lot better than a lot of what we have out today. It's easy to burst a plastic pipe. It would depend on which plastic pipes you're talking about too, because you have different thicknesses of PVC that's being used for different things, and that's a major concern. You have to hope that it take a certain amount of cold, because in a lot of the homes that are being built now, a lot of the other facilities, they're actually using PVC for the sprinkler systems, for the protective sprinkler systems. So they must feel that those are probably, they may not, the plastic may not conduct the cold quite as well as copper does. Copper's a metal. Metals tend to cold. Now, there may be somebody out there who can probably answer this question better than me, because they do know that. But cold does actually conduct very well in metals. And my experience in my own is that I've had more broken copper piping than I have with plastic.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mentioned earlier things about the gutters, making sure that we keep those cleaned of twigs and debris. So I don't need to spend much time here. Make sure, again, your roof's in good repair. But also check your siding. Make sure that your siding is in good condition. It's not starting to come loose. I used to have a home up in the Flagstaff area, and the winds were so strong there that it just shook the house all the time. And I would end up having to go through and re-nail the panels back down on the side of it because of that. And it was a regular thing. About once a year, I'm out there pounding those nails back down. Under a strong wind, a bigger storm, I certainly wouldn't want those things ripped off, and there goes the insulation and everything else. So make sure your siding's in good condition, and all the edging around your doors and windows and stuff like that, where you could possibly have leakage and rainwater damage. Because we have more than just the frozen pipes where we can have this water damage. It can come from all kinds of sources, including the heavy rains that are pounding against the siding, heavy rains pounding against windows and doors. And it may even back up because of the amount of water that builds up on the ground. So while it may not be quite classified as a flood, it still falls into a large amount of water that's able to penetrate into the building.
Oh my.
Yes, vacant buildings. This is the one thing I really don't like to see is vacant buildings, but sometimes we have no choice. And in such cases, there's certain things we need to make sure that we do. One in a vacant building is shut off the water. I was in this property I had in Flagstaff. I might as well use my own personal example. In the property I had in Flagstaff, I thought it was good enough to drain my lines and go off and leave it and come back whenever I came back. Flagstaff sits at 7,000 feet. They get a lot of snow. They get a lot of cold. Next time I came back over to my trailer, I turned on the water, and usually you hear the rush of water and then it stops because all the lines are now filled. In this case, I heard the rush of water and I continued to hear the rush of water. And then I watched the rush of water flowing. So it was not only do you need to drain your pipes, but you need to actually have a compressor to blow those pipes out, because water can settle in low spots. And that's in those low spots that I had my problem. And it just settled, it froze, and the copper pipes just burst. So you want to make sure you drain and blow out your plumbing. Remove your water from your toilet tanks. That is an actual picture. It's not mine. That's not my Flagstaff property. Thank goodness. But this is a church property, and it is a church property we actually received a claim on for other damage, and water damage and freezing. But you can see where the water in that tank expanded, and it just totally burst out the tank in the toilet. Now, if nobody was in that building and the water was still on, what's going to happen? Right now it's frozen, probably it wouldn't flow, but once it thaws, it's just going to start bleeding water all over the place. And
it might take quite a while for somebody to realize there's a problem there.
Exactly, and that's the fear in a vacant building, is that it will be noticed. But even in our churches, when we take off and we leave them, a lot of times they're empty for days.
Yeah.
And in a cold climate, the exact same thing can happen if we're not careful. We'll talk about what to do in the ones that we do use in a moment. But and we still recommend that draining everything that's got water in it, and then check it daily if you can. That's not always possible, but if possible, check it daily. And that's what we recommend actually for our churches is get by the church, even if you're not supposed to be there. You're going through a very cold spell. It's a possibility of frozen pipes. Get in there and check your church out and make sure that everything's in good condition. Your water's running okay in it. Um, your heat's on. That heat kicks out and you're not there. Who knows what's going to happen. One of the most important things we can do, obviously, is maintain warmth. I know we don't want to sometimes leave our energy going, our heat running in a building that's empty, but that's the kind of thing that it saves a building in a lot of ways. It'll help save you from having the frozen pipes and the damage that occurs from them when the water starts leaking out of them. But it also prevents the other things that come. If you leave a building unheated for any length of time, they start to get musty. There's moisture in the air, and so you can end up with all these other elements that are starting to do damage on your property and your belongings. So try to keep the heat up around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's poorly insulated, you may have to set that temperature even higher. You'll know what kind of feels comfortable in there. Also recommend that you open your interior doors so that air will flow around the building, and open your cupboard doors so that air gets in underneath those, because where's a lot of your plumbing? It's in underneath your kitchen sink. If the kitchen sink cupboard doors are closed, then that can actually be a lot colder if it's on an outside wall than actually in the room itself. So the room might feel good, but where your plumbing is may not be quite so comfortable. So make sure you open those, and you'll have a lot less trouble, a lot less problem with frozen pipes and other conditions in your churches or schools or whatever buildings you may have. One last resort that I've used before. I don't like to do it because water is an important commodity. We like to conserve water, but sometimes in a condition like this where you've just got winter cold extremes hitting, that you just have a feeling that they're going to freeze, is let your water run a little bit. And I usually recommend is a stream of water about the size of a thickness of a pencil. That's a lot of water, but if it means saving your frozen pipes through the night, keeping your pipes from freezing, then it's worth doing.
So that's really a last resort concept. They're right there.
Yeah, I try not to do that. I don't like to, just be running water down, and then folks that have septic tanks, it's just not even bleeding off. It's going down there, it's filling up their tanks, and it doesn't leach off as fast as you're maybe trying to fill it. So that's what I'd recommend. As I look at safety in a facility, obviously winter, we don't want the frozen pipes, but there's a lot of other accidents that occur with it. And I really can't leave this subject alone without mentioning the safety of people. Ice, snow, rain is just conducive to people slipping and falling. And so there's certain things that we just need to make sure our parking lots have been shoveled, plowed, make sure our sidewalks are shoveled and clear, our steps, make sure there's some non-slip material put down, some ice melting materials put down to keep it off. It's just too much of a hazard, and you have, and especially in a church, we have a lot of people coming to our churches, and they expect to be able to get up and down those stairs without slipping and falling and stumbling. Make sure you also have non-slip floor mats inside your doors. If otherwise the water gets tracked across the floors, and suddenly the inside of your church is almost as slippery as the outside would have been. So you want to make sure you're keeping your floors dry. Put out caution wet floor signs. I want to emphasize, I've seen where when we don't have non-slip floor mats around handy, somebody puts down a towel to absorb moisture. Well, I can tell you from personal experience that towels are not a good thing to step on. I did step into a facility through a doorway once and stepped onto a towel, and I went through a lot of gyrations, but fortunately I never hit the floor. But that towel wanted to just act like a skateboard under my feet. And so one of my quickest wet recommendations was to get some floor mats in there. So, and look also for hanging icicles on your property, and that's one of the things in the fall is to make sure your trees are in good condition. You haven't got some limbs about to break, because as soon as they become heavy with a little bit of ice and snow, they're gonna come down. So it's best to get rid of them beforehand. Look for those hanging icicles along the eaves and things. They can cause some injuries too. So make sure you get rid of those. There's a lot of sources we can go to, and let me just kind of finish by saying that I've got applications on my phone for all kinds of things, from hurricanes to tornadoes to earthquakes to violent storms. And so we have all kinds of sources available to find out what the weather conditions are going to be. Our local news is just constantly telling us we're in for a big one, folks. And, keep your eyes and ears open and be prepared for that change that may be coming. And hopefully we can all get through this winter that's coming up nice and warm and dry.
All right. So we do have one question.
Okay.
And that is going back to the sprinkler system idea. Do you have any specific tips about how to keep your sprinkler systems from freezing?
Well, part of it's design. In where I live, most of my sprinkler pipes are under the insulation in the attic. So my climate's fairly reasonable. The attic stays fairly warm in there. It's not quite as cold. It will get cold, but not usually within freezing. But there's different types of sprinkler systems, and I'd like to hope that when somebody's in a really icy cold climate, that the consideration has gone to the type of system that is ready that will handle those frigid conditions. There's a lot of them you've got your sprinkler heads, and instead of being filled with water, the pipes are filled with air. And then there's a valve that actually holds the water back somewhere further back in the system. Well, when there's a fire and the sprinkler system or the sprinkler head activates, it lets the air out. The air lets the ball valve, or whatever type of valve it is back there, release, and then the water will flow through the pipes. I'd like to hope in most cases we haven't got a sprinkler pipe that's in an exterior condition that's got water in it. If we do, we could try to insulate it with possibly some insulation. I don't know if they use heat wrap. I'd probably want to check my local sprinkler installer and say, what do you recommend I do with my plumbing, just to be sure that you're doing the right thing for them and not actually causing the sprinklers to do something they're not supposed to do.
Right. Well, thank you. Folks, if you do have additional questions, this is a great time to type them into the question box. While you're doing that, let me just let you know what's coming up in the next safety webinar. The next one is about supervision. So kind of getting off some of our recent topics having to do with structures and property, getting into supervision, which is a really, really important topic. That webinar will be taking place November 13th at 2:30. That is November 13th at 2:30 Eastern Time. And that's an important point to remember. This is Eastern Time. We have missed a few people because they thought it was a different time zone. So make a note of that, November 13th at 2:30 Eastern Time. If you do think of a question you'd like to ask later on, or it's maybe a little long or something, just go ahead and email it directly to me at dfournier@adventistrisk.org. That's D as in David, F as in Frank, OURNIER @adventistrisk.org. I'll be happy to direct that probably on to John or another expert as makes the most sense for the question. If you're looking for more safety resources, please visit our website, adventistrisk.org, where we have more resources available for you. And of course, I want to point you to our free email newsletter called Solutions, which we send about once a week um, on safety issues relevant to the church. And you can sign up for that resource on our website for free. And please share that with other safety officers, other safety minded people, the deacons at your church. Share that far and wide. We'd like to share safety information with as many people as we can. So, with that, I want to thank you again for joining us. And thank you, John, for sharing
you.
with us. We really appreciate your thoughts. We look forward to speaking with you next time.